Hey guys, my name is Deon. I'm a DOP based in London, and I wanted to share some behind the scenes of a TV commercial I did recently. It was all day exterior, kind of one scene that's supposed to look as close to, uh, all of 15 or 20 minutes. Um, and just a couple of decisions we made to try and maintain the look for the course of a day. For this commercial, the director really wanted to focus on this quintessential savanna tree. And so we knew that would be the central point and sort of focus of our composition, the way we block the scene, and sort of our most beautiful element, kind of like the defining element of the aesthetic of the overall commercial. I figured a good place for us to start would be some images from the scout. Z, the director, had been to the location before in the afternoon. From those images and some path, we could tell that it was going to be a morning location for us. And so we made sure with production to be there for sunrise on the scout, the sort of technical scout day, which is when we captured this photograph. At this point, we'd established we were going to want to shoot this early morning to get the sun rising on that side, sort of behind those hills in the background. And this would have been taken, moments after sunrise, and just sort of finding the angle where the sun is coming up behind this tree. So here's a video clip I shot, must have been a couple minutes before sunrise. Get a kind of idea of this beautiful misty hills back there and that kind of thing. I sort of knew, even though we'd be there in this really beautiful time on the shoot day as well, that's not a look that you can maintain over the course of an entire commercial. And so sometimes you have to kind of like make the choice to schedule something not only for the most beautiful light, but for light that's realistic for you to be able to maintain over the course of a commercial. The art department had some tents, or actually, I think this might have been one of the tents we used on the shoot day too. Once we'd kind of established what our general kind of lineup would be, we were sort of placing the tents, trying to figure out the best positioning for the wide shot. I find having a nice-ish camera with you on the recce is pretty invaluable for just getting a bit of a look and feel of how some of your stuff might look on the day. As useful as it is to use an iPhone with like a CAD-Range or Artemis or one of these sort of rangefinder apps, there is some sort of magic when you use a real camera that I feel gets a bit lost. And just find it really useful sometimes to see things with a little bit of depth of field and a little bit more romance than an iPhone. Here you can kind of see, even though it's quite backlit, there's not a lot sort of wrapping around on the face, and there's quite a lot of this blue kind of ambient spill. We'll circle back on why I mentioned that now. Here you can kind of see, we obviously spent like a couple of minutes, 20, 30, 40 minutes on set, blocking the characters and trying to get a sense for how they might end up sitting on the day. It's another frame I rolled a little bit later on in the day. Well, I should say a little bit later on in the morning, maybe about 20 minutes after that first one we looked at. Some more stills. Again, you can see quite a lot of that blue contamination from the sky. Figuring out the layout of the tents. You'll see that this sort of general layout was what we settled on for the commercial. We found this rock. We called it Elephant Rock because it looks like an elephant's skin. That's where we ended up shooting our pack moment for the end of the commercial. This is a different rock, but I wanted to just experiment with the idea of having some foregrounded elements for that pack shot. I think we all decided that would be a great idea, but we preferred Elephant Rock, so we spoke to the art department to bring us some kind of freestanding grass and trees, little trees and things like that, that we could repurpose as foreground elements. That's an idea of what the tree looks like way later in the morning, which realistically is sort of the meat of where we would have to shoot. Obviously, as is often the case, you sort of prioritize your wide angle shots for early or late in the day to get the most angle out of the sun, and then you work to maintain that sort of look for the rest of the day. I really love this idea, this sort of composition, looking down at someone just chilling. Just playing around with the sort of blocking that we established to see where you might be able to compose a frame that feels nice and full and three-dimensional. Here we were sort of sizing up that angle from the tent. Here's the director with my camera kind of having a bit of a look. Yeah, this is kind of like, if this was the real version of the look that I would try and maintain throughout the whole commercial, this would be like a good sort of blueprint for that. This as well. I was experimenting with this idea of having the frame like heavily weighted, kind of on the bottom, and making it more about the grass, and then sort of having the tree depth in the background here. We ended up sort of doing something like that, but you often go into something with a lot of ideas, but I think it's important to stay open-minded and sort of instinctual to kind of course correct and do something else on the shoot there. This was an angle I really liked, much further away on a longer lens with a bit more compression, but it was really messy in terms of kind of these background trees. I liked this stuff in the foreground a lot, but I think we sort of went for something a little bit more stylized. So the sun basically came up right behind this tree and then goes around back left and then comes up and over and sort of sets behind where I'm standing now. So from this angle you would go from sort of completely backlit to 3/4 frontlit. This is from the position of the tent pretty much, or our sort of main tent area. You can kind of get a better idea of the rise. 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. is sort of your problem area, and then this is from the complete opposite side of the tree. That's what sunset is. Here I had a little bit of a look from this tent angle. This is just a frame from my DJI action on a selfie stick. I find sometimes just rolling a little bit of this type of thing with a bit more of a bird's eye view is really useful for getting a sense of space and where things are in relationship to one another, as well as just discussing with the director when you're sort of discussing blocking and camera angles and stuff. It helps a lot. I did toy with the idea of modeling this in Blender, and I sort of did, I guess I did this, but largely this was just to get a sense of the scale of the chameleons in the commercial. Obviously these were CG characters, so I got the chameleon models from our CG artist and played around with a couple things, predominantly so I could communicate blocking with the director. So here kind of laid it out like this, which is useful to be able to discuss our blocking. At first we'd thought of maybe doing something like having the chameleons on a rock or some kind of log or something on this side of the tent. And then I sort of modeled these things just to get a sense of what that relationship between the characters and the chameleons would be. This was another kind of look at that. Okay, onto the shoot day. We had some windy lights. I sort of thought these would actually do a bit more than they did for us, but from the tech scout, I'd felt like the foregrounded grass and everything was maybe a little bit too dark when I was trying to hold on to the entire exposure of the sun. In the end, I'm sure they did something, but largely they were just useful in these very early morning hours. We were obviously sort of standing by about an hour before sunrise to kind of be able to see what we were doing and line everything up. Yeah, it was really beautiful out there. So this would have been super early. You can see a super wide shutter angle and high ISO, just to be able to line up the shot. This is always tricky because you are sort of relying on your tools to know where the sun's going to pop, but you never really truly know until about maybe 5 minutes before it does. But yeah, love this frame. Some more just sort of standing by. iPhone's done a bit of a weird white balance here, tungsten balanced, but here you can see our sort of crew. Not a massive crew, but here we are sort of standing by, camera on a slider. We had some freelance pieces of grass that we dressed into camera to kind of decorate the foreground to our liking. I'm like, how do I explain this? Here you can kind of see it got pretty gnarly with cloud cover from about lunchtime, which made it quite challenging to maintain this very sunny look. Terry, our colorist, is incredible and did a lot of heavy lifting for me here to kind of match the stuff we shot when it was very cloudy with the sunny looking stuff. So here you can see the lighting crew kind of setting up Wendy's with CTB to match the kind of daylight temperature. Cool, so let's get into this for a second. Okay, so this is our tree. Sunrise is over here, sunset is over here. So our first angle was sort of here, looking at the tree this way, at which point we had the tents kind of like this sort of layout. And the sun directly behind this tree. Then I knew as the sun would be making its way this way, kind of as the day went on. Let's say this was maybe around 6 a.m. By the time it was 8 a.m., the sun would be sort of up here somewhere, and then by 12 would be here. So the general idea was to start here, then move into this more kind of 3/4 angle here to keep the sun sort of largely behind where we were looking, and then to kind of keep moving around this tree as the day progressed, so that as the sun's moving this way, we're moving this way. We're lucky in the sense that there's not an awful lot of kind of landmark apart from the tree, and as long as we were keeping that tree in the background in a fairly central position, I felt pretty confident that you wouldn't really notice any real continuity that would matter. And so we basically just chased the sun along. We repositioned our entire campsite slightly from this wide to this, and then quite a bit for the rest of the day. We kind of, if we can imagine our sort of campsite being here, we ended up moving it kind of here after lunch, so we could continue shooting in this sort of general direction with the sun backlit over here. Hopefully that makes sense. Here's a photo of my monitor. My face getting absolutely roasted in the sun. Yeah, love shots like this, super layered, camera close to the ground, lots of interesting texture. Here you'll notice some shadows from some grass that I moved in closer to kind of just break up the flatness of this quality on the tent over here. And then as for the rest, we kind of just dressed everything to camera. This is the biggest ticket item we had on this job. We had a crane with a, I want to say that's a 12 by 30 or something like that. It's wider than it is tall. Ideally, it would have been nice to have something that could articulate more on this axis. So it's, if you imagine like it was tabletop like this, it would have been cool to maybe be able to do this. And in hindsight, I think it might also have made sense to experiment with having a rag kind of hanging off of it here. But I was really happy with what it did, mainly it created a lot of shadow on camera side, so we had a lot less return from the grass from the front, and it cut down a lot of that blue sort of ambience. And then for sure also later in the day when it got really cloudy, I feel like the neg does even more for you in terms of taking away some of that sort of very, very soft, just very white source and kind of giving it a bit of shape. We also ended up shooting quite a lot on this ARRI lens. It was the 65-300. Super nice zoom, quite clean. Ended up using a lens node plugin on that footage to kind of make it blend with the K35s a bit better. But yeah, super duper nice zoom. We hadn't actually planned to use it all that much for the coverage, but after the first sort of single that we've shot on that, we felt like it just felt really good, so we kind of pivoted and decided to do everyone's kind of main performance take on that lens. This is just some goofy little wide angle adapter I've been playing with on some of my M glass, and that's the camera. Oh, interesting. I thought I'd added stills from the shoot.